Joe's sidekick tore through the air toward Bruce's ribs. The impact never came. Bruce's shin met the kick mid-flight, checking it with bone-jarring precision. But his right hand was already moving, two fingers stabbing upward like a viper strike, punching through Joe's guard. They stopped 1 inch from Joe's eyes, frozen, the champion's next breath locked in his throat, his pupils dilated, tracking the fingers that hovered at the edge of blindness. Sweat beaded on his temple. The morning sun glinted off Bruce's fingernails. Behind them, Terry Hughes and Daniel Park stood motionless in the sand, their own drill forgotten. The ocean crashed against the shore, salt spray hanging in the dawn air. Gulls screamed overhead. Joe's extended leg trembled, still chambered from the aborted kick. His jaw tightened. 15 years of tournament victories, 23 knockouts, national champion 3 times over, and he couldn't move. Bruce's expression remained calm, almost serene. His fingers didn't waver, not a millimeter. The distance held perfectly, waiting. You see it now. Bruce's voice cut through the sound of waves. Joe's throat worked. His eyes never left those fingers. What he saw in that frozen moment would shatter everything he knew about fighting. 15 minutes earlier, the Pacific swallowed the last of the night. Joe's feet pounded wet sand in rhythm. Each stride sent salt spray clinging to his calves. June dawn bled orange across Santa Monica Beach, and the air tasted of kelp and possibility. His lungs burned clean, 3 miles down, 2 to go. Then he saw them. 2 men moved through forms near the waterline. Slow, deliberate, but the smaller one, Joe's stride faltered. That compact frame, the fluid precision, he'd seen those movements in Chuck Norris's dojo, demonstrated on grainy film reels that left everyone silent. Bruce Lee. Joe slowed to a walk, chest heaving. Sand crunched beneath his running shorts as he approached. The student stopped mid-technique, eyes tracking the stranger. Bruce turned, no surprise on his face, as if he'd sensed Joe's arrival before footsteps announced it. Chuck Norris said you're teaching something revolutionary. Joe's breath still came hard. Bruce's smile carried no pride, only certainty. I teach adaptation. The waves crashed louder now. Joe felt his championship belt suddenly weighing him down from miles away. Want to experience it? Joe nodded once. Bruce's expression shifted, not quite a challenge, something sharper. Throw your best kicks. What Joe didn't see was Terry Hughes taking 3 steps back into deeper sand. Joe planted his left foot deeper into the sand, grains compressed beneath his heel. He chambered his right knee high, emotion drilled through 15 years of competition, hundreds of knockouts. The roundhouse exploded. Hip rotation perfect. Shin whipping toward Bruce's ribs, power that had broken tournament boards, dropped heavyweight champions, his world tilted. The supporting leg, gone. Joe's back slammed into wet sand. Salt spray misted his face. The impact forced air from his lungs in a grunt that mingled with the crash of surf behind him. Above, morning sky spun briefly before stabilizing. Bruce stood exactly where he'd been, not breathing hard, not repositioning. The ocean lapped at the shoreline 20 feet away, indifferent rhythm unchanged. Joe pushed up on his elbows, sand coating his shoulders. His jaw worked, searching for words that wouldn't form. 15 years, tournament grand champion. Humbled in 3 seconds, Terry and Daniel had stopped moving entirely, frozen mid-drill. Bruce stepped closer, his shadow falling across Joe's chest. His voice carried no mockery, no triumph, just observation. You kick where I used to be. The words hung in the salt air, simple and devastating. Joe stared up at him, a champion suddenly illiterate in a language he thought he'd mastered. Bruce dropped to one knee, his finger carving lines into the damp sand. The grains clung to his skin as he sketched a stick figure mid-kick. Joe crouched beside him, tasting salt air and humiliation. Every kick requires balance transfer, Bruce said, his voice calm as the surf behind them. He drew an arrow showing weight shifting from rear leg to supporting leg. Here, a vulnerability window opens. Joe's chest tightened. 15 years of training, nobody had shown him this. Bruce's finger moved again, etching another figure. You see target, execute technique. He tapped the first drawing, then the second. I see you preparing. Attack the preparation. The diagram stared up at Joe like an accusation. His side kick, his roundhouse, every weapon he'd perfected, all began with a chamber, a weight shift, a telegraph, broadcasted intention. He'd won tournaments with power, but Bruce had read him like a manual. 15 years, Joe said, the words scraping his throat. Nobody taught this. Bruce stood, brushing sand from his palm. Kata teaches form. His eyes held no judgment, only truth. I teach combat reality. Joe stared at the ocean, the horizon blurring. If perfect form meant nothing, what had those 15 years built? Joe stared at the horizon where ocean met sky. Gray water folded into white foam, endless rhythm, indifferent to champions and their broken pride. His hands opened and closed at his sides, testing the air for answers that wouldn't come. 15 years, every trophy on his shelf was built on readable technique. Every opponent he demolished had simply been slower, not smarter. Train with me, Bruce said. The words hung between them like a held breath. Every Sunday. 6 months, I'll transform your power into something your opponent can't predict. Joe's jaw muscles flexed. The offer meant admitting he'd climbed the wrong mountain. That karate champion meant nothing if a man half his size could read him like yesterday's newspaper. Terry and Daniel watched from 20 feet away, motionless. Joe turned from the water. When do we start? Bruce pointed down. The sand beneath their feet still held the erased diagrams, ghost marks of revelation. Now no preparation, no ceremony. Joe dropped into his fighting stance, but Bruce shook his head. First, you unlearn. He stepped forward, fingers loose, weight distributed like smoke. Throw your roundhouse again, slower this time. I want you to feel every mistake your body makes before. Silence. The first Sunday, Joe's kick chamber rose high as always. Bruce tapped his thigh mid-lift. Stop, lower, again. Sand shifted beneath Joe's bare feet, cool and yielding in the dawn light. His muscles fought the new geometry. The fourth Sunday, sweat dripped salt into his mouth. Bruce circled, arms folded. The chamber drops 3 inches. Good, but the hip still telegraphs. Terry and Daniel watched from their training circle, movement suspended. Sunday 8, Joe threw a roundhouse with no warning even to himself. His body flinched, confused by its own speed. Bruce's eyes narrowed. There, that flicker, hold it. By Sunday 12, the ocean's rhythm matched Joe's breathing. Waves collapsed as his legs snapped forward. No lift, no wind-up, just explosion from stillness. Bruce whispered corrections like a man tuning an instrument. The power remains, the preparation is dying. Sunday 16. Joe stood dripping, chest heaving. Bruce walked a slow circle around him. Joe's legs trembled, but not from exhaustion, from unfamiliarity with what they'd become. Terry leaned toward Daniel, mouth open. Bruce stopped circling. His expression revealed nothing, but December's tournament loomed 3 weeks away, and Joe had no idea if this formless thing inside him could survive real violence. The gymnasium lights burned white against polished wood floors. Joe circled Marcus Kane, December heat trapped inside the tournament hall walls. Spectators leaned forward, hungry for the legendary power they'd watched demolish opponents for years. Kane shifted into his granite stance, forearms layered like armor across his centerline. The man hadn't been knocked down in 14 months. The crowd murmured, bets exchanged hands. Everyone knew Joe's pattern, the coiled chamber, the explosive rotation, the freight train impact that broke guards and ribs alike. Joe's weight settled, no shift, no preparation. His shin materialized against Kane's ribs. It just appeared, the kick birthing itself from stillness. Kane's guard covered space Joe's foot had never occupied. The connection sounded like a mallet striking wet clay. Kane's eyes glazed, pupils dilating as his brain scrambled for context it couldn't find. His knees folded. He dropped. The echo of impact faded before his shoulder blades met the mat. Silence swallowed the gymnasium. 16 Sundays of sand and dawn had rewritten Joe's body into something the crowd couldn't recognize. but Joe barely registered Kane's unconscious form sprawled beneath the lights, because in that frozen moment, he understood he'd stopped being himself entirely. The referee's hand clamped Joe's wrist, hoisting it skyward. Roars cascaded from the bleachers, a wall of sound that should have tasted like copper victory. But Joe's eyes tracked past the crowd, past the medics crouched over Kane's twitching form, toward something invisible. His chest rose and fell in measured rhythm, sweat carving rivers down his jaw, yet his face held no triumph, only the blank expression of a man solving an equation mid-fight. Marcus Kane lay sprawled 3 feet away. First round. One strike, Joe's hand dropped to his side. His knuckles bore no bruises. His shins carried no ache. The collision had been surgical, not brutal, and that difference gnawed at him like hunger. 16 Sundays in sand had rebuilt him, yes, but into what? The question hung unanswered as he stepped back from Kane's body. Bruce's voice surfaced, calm as morning tide. Combat is reading, not executing. Joe's shoulders lowered half an inch. The realization didn't arrive as lightning but as erosion. He hadn't become a better kicker. His technique remained identical. What had transformed was the space before the kick, the invisible preparation his opponents no longer saw coming. He'd learned to vanish in plain sight. The gymnasium doors burst open. 5 men in press badges flooded toward the ring. Cameras raised, questions forming on their lips like rounds in a chamber. They came like vultures sensing blood, microphones thrust forward, cameras flash. The air in the tournament hall thickens with sweat and desperation, reporters jostling for position around Joe's corner. He stands motionless, chest barely rising, the detachment from his victory still clinging to his skin like salt residue. A tape recorder clicks on. The sound cuts through the chaos. What changed your style? Joe drags his hand across his face. Sweat smears his knuckles. He searches for words that might explain 16 Sundays, the sand, the philosophical rewiring Bruce performed on his nervous system. But language feels inadequate for describing invisibility. His jaw tightens, then releases. Bruce Lee taught me that perfect technique is worthless if your opponent reads it before you throw it. He pauses, letting the sentence settle. Stop training form, start training invisibility. Silence, 3 seconds of it. Then pencils scratch furiously across notepads. The tape recorder spins, capturing the heresy. Within 2 weeks, Black Belt magazine prints the quote verbatim. Within 4, it appears in Karate Illustrated, Official Karate, Fighting Stars. The words spread through dojos like gasoline igniting, questioning everything traditional masters built their reputations on. And in a dojo in Okinawa, a 7th-degree black belt reads the interview and crushes the magazine in his fist. The story refused to stay in the sand. Within weeks, students abandoned kata lines mid-drill, asking instructors questions that had no traditional answers. Why chamber the kick if it telegraphs intent? Why practice forms an opponent can memorize? The scent of polished hardwood floors mingled with uncertainty as senior belts walked out of dojos that couldn't answer Bruce's challenge. In Tokyo, a young instructor demonstrated the simultaneous block-hand strike principle Bruce had deployed against Joe. His teacher expelled him, but 3 students followed him into the rain. In Sao Paulo, another dojo emptied. In Manchester, another. The hemorrhage accelerated. Adaptation replaced repetition. Combat reality devoured ceremony. 40 years later, fighters wearing 4-ounce gloves would study grainy footage of that beach encounter, searching for the invisible moment when Joe's eyes widened, when invincibility shattered. They found it in the freeze. Bruce's fingers hovering 1 inch from the champion's face, not a technique, a transmission. The understanding that fighting isn't about perfecting movement, it's about erasing prediction. Every mixed martial artist tracing their lineage back through coaches and gyms eventually arrived at Santa Monica, June 1969, where a philosophy was born in a single breath between 2 men. The finger jab that never landed conquered the world.